When you study stories, their structure, their flow, you see that they have a common pattern. The best stories revolve around a character facing a conflict or a challenge. The character acts, then faces a setback. They act again, face another setback. Each setback gets worse. The stakes keep getting higher. Finally, they reach the greatest challenge, the climax, the biggest challenge with the highest stakes, and the character gets through it. Of course, everyone then lives happily ever after. That's how most great stories are written. Of course, that's oversimplified, and there are twists and turns, but that's fiction. But doesn't it feel like we're living in a similar kind of story right now? And unfortunately, it doesn't feel like we're too close to the end. In this case, the main character is us, the United States. It is also each of us as individuals. The challenges are acute. Some, like racism, are long-standing. Others, like COVID-19, are new. Together, they have created very high stakes, not only externally, as in solving the challenge with vaccines and new policies, but also internally, with anxiety and hopelessness. We can all feel it. So what should we do? Can Jewish wisdom on this day help us? Can this holiday help us? Yes, of course it can and it will. This may be our first virtual Rosh Hashanah, but it may also be our most meaningful and important Rosh Hashanah, the time when we need it most. We need the perspective, the message, the guidance of our tradition. We may not get to that happy ending by the end of these holy days, but we can get a glimpse, and we can see the path before us. One Hebrew word opens up this path. It is one of the most repeated words in the Torah, and it appears half a dozen times in the Torah reading we just heard. The word is yirah, or yar, comes in different variations. It means fear. But it means much more than fear. Fear in English has negative connotations. But in Hebrew, it means something more like awe, wonder, perspective. It also means seeing, really experiencing and seeing something with true clarity. With that true clarity comes awe and wonder. We see the truth behind appearances. And this true seeing, this true awe, doesn't lead to despair. It doesn't lead to denial. It doesn't even lead to brazenness, which are all possible responses. True seeing, the kind of seeing that Abraham experienced, the kind of seeing Moses experienced when he saw the burning bush, that true seeing leads to two core responses: humility and hope. In other words, humility, a respect for all we do not know, combined with hope, a determination to make the most of what we do know. Let's look first at humility. It's not a word we hear much these days. We tend to be a culture of self-promotion and certainty. Social media seems to be begging us for our opinions on everything. So without that humility, we know what's right. We're certain. We're certain who's right, who's wrong, and we are absolutely convinced of our views. But humility is acknowledging what we do not know. It is recognizing our limitations. It is a form of awe because we see that the world is so much vaster than we comprehend. Humility lets us live with the radical uncertainty of life. Ezra Taft Benson, a writer and poet, said that pride is concerned with who is right. Humility is concerned with what is right. To this end, this past summer I read a wonderful book called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. It's an extraordinary book about purpose, happiness, meaning. But one argument just really got to me. The opposite of humility, he teaches, is ego. Quote, everything in life has something to teach you, but ego gets in the way of opportunities you have, had, or will have. Humility, on the other hand, is what keeps us there, concerned we don't know enough and that we must continue to study. Ego rushes to the end, rationalizes that patience is for losers, wrongly seeing that patience as a weakness. What is rare, he writes, is not raw talent, skill, or even confidence, but humility, diligence, and self-awareness. Humility is not meekness. It is not giving up. It is focusing on what matters most. It is the quiet action of change, of progress, of achievement. It is recognizing the limits of our knowledge, but not the limits of what we can achieve. It is sublimating ego to purpose. In the midst of our challenges, of endemic racism, implicit bias, a global pandemic, poor leadership, what does humility require of us? It requires first that we resist certain temptations. See, we may be tempted to give up on the ideals of America, to give up on Martin Luther King's dream of a world where we would be judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. We may be tempted to give up on a future where we can return to the normal joys of being together, going to concerts, traveling, living. Many people have given up, you can just tell. And every day, we seem to see a more distressing view of the future. That distress generates headlines and attention. A civil war is coming, we read. Tens of millions of people will die by the middle of next year. Now, don't get me wrong. We have much to worry about. And we need to act with responsibility and an abundance of caution, as we are doing right now. That's prudent and responsible. But we cannot let fear, we cannot let our ego, our certainty, paralyze us. Fear can paralyze us with desperation. We can say, let's not try anything. We're doomed. Let's give up. But then the other side of that fear is a certainty, an absolute certainty of what must be done. There's no need to consider other perspectives. So that ego can pull us both to desperation and to absolute certainty. Humility carves a different path. It reminds us that we can't control the future. We can't stop racism from existing. We can't control the virus and pull the virus out of thin air. We can't wave a magic wand and solve it all. But there is much we can do. Nothing is predestined. Sometimes the hardest moments open up the greatest possibilities. Suffering under Herbert Hoover, for example, opened up new paths for America under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The devastation of the Holocaust was followed 3 years later by the founding of the State of Israel. So we need to remember America is not a hopelessly racist country, and we are not destined to live forever in the shadow of a pandemic. We have hope. One of my foremost teachers, my first rabbi when I was a child in Houston, Texas, died just this last month. And we had many conversations before I entered the rabbinate. His loss is quite painful. But I cherish a quote about hope that he shared with me. It came as an offhand remark, but the moment I heard it, I sensed its power. The worse it is, he said, the better it can be. What a powerful Jewish way of seeing the world. Hope is never lost. Hope keeps us on the journey, and the journey never ends. I mentioned Hoover and FDR and the Holocaust in Israel. Those are big achievements. But what about something a little closer to home? How do we maintain hope as individuals, as normal people? One is by remembering our history. But another is by simply doing and acting. One of the truths about Judaism as a religion is that doing often comes before believing. When the Israelites accepted the Torah at Mount Sinai, they said the words, Na'aseh v'nishma, which means, we will do it, and then we will understand it. Because sometimes we don't fully understand something until we do it. I mean, think about being a parent, right? Nobody knows what it entails until you actually do it, understanding. And if you understood everything, you might wonder whether it's a good idea to do it. Sometimes understanding comes after doing. It's the only way we learn. And when we do, we realize we are capable of much more than we could have understood beforehand. That's why sometimes we have to do in order to understand, because if we understood without doing, we might not do. Now, I know that one of the greatest privileges of being a rabbi is the opportunity to conduct funerals. Now, you might be saying to yourself, or thinking to yourself as you're looking on this screen, Rabbi, that sounds a little morbid. You like doing funerals? You think it's an opportunity to do a funeral? Isn't it awful and hard? Well, sometimes it is. An unexpected loss or an early loss shakes all of us. But more often than not, leading a funeral is life-affirming. I get a front row seat, a close-up look at what makes for a meaningful, memorable life. What do people remember about us? What stood out to them? What made others happy? Those are life lessons. And a few years ago, I got exposed to a remarkable life. This man had been a moderately successful attorney, and he was 67 when his wife, who was 60, passed away. It was just 6 months after he retired as well. They were planning, it was right at the cusp of this new life that they were going to enjoy together, traveling and so forth. But then his world fell out from under him. According to his sons, whom I met with, he became a hermit for about a year. Nobody saw him. And then he decided to start over, to get out. He volunteered for a while, moved, and then at age 80, he applied to join the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps said he needed a year of Spanish in order to join. So he ordered his Harvard transcript. He had graduated in 1939. And lo and behold, he didn't remember, but he had taken a year of Spanish. So the Peace Corps sent him to a mountain village in Guatemala. He stayed a year, returned, and began volunteering again. He died at age 100. And now one of his dreams as a young man had been to own a goat farm. He ended up getting married and joining the service, the military, for World War II, so he never fulfilled that dream of owning a goat farm. But shortly before he died, he set aside a down payment for his granddaughter, $30,000, so that she could purchase and run a goat farm. Somehow, he had achieved that dream as well. Now, we can learn so much from this story. One truth is that our dreams often take a long time to be fulfilled. We meet twists and turns on that path that we didn't even foresee. But somehow, we attain them, even if we don't attain them in the way we imagined. Think again about Moses. It seems like he never realizes his dream of entering into the promised land. He dies on Mount Nebo overlooking the promised land. And in one sense, that's true. He never does enter the promised land. But think about the generations over the last 4,000 years who have studied Moses' words, his teachings, and who have settled and lived in the land of Israel. His dream was fulfilled in ways he didn't even imagine. In reflecting on his life when he retired, my dad expressed a similar idea. He wrote this essay, and this line just jumped out at me. Like almost everybody, he wrote, all my dreams didn't come true. But more realistically, maybe what came true was more than I could have dreamed would really happen. As Jews, as Americans, we have realized dreams greater than our ancestors even imagined. We got to places they could never have foreseen. But we still know that the world as it is not yet the world as it ought to be. That's the second lesson of our man's life story I just told. He never stopped pursuing his dreams. And so must we, as individuals and as a community. One of the powers of hope, humility and hope, one of the powers of hope is that it unifies us. It brings us together in a common dream. Hope in a different future keeps us connected in pursuit of that dream. Now think about the different sounds of the shofar. There's Tikiya, and then there's Teru, There's a big difference between those sounds. The Tikiya is, in a sense, unbroken, just moves forward. Teruah is broken. Now the Torah tells us that when Moses summoned the people of Israel together, he summoned them together with a Tikiya, with a unity. That sound symbolizes the unity of the people and their shared purpose together. Hope and unity go hand in hand. Now you might be thinking, Rabbi, that's a cliche. That's not very profound. Hope and unity go hand in hand. Great. Yeah, it might kind of sound like a cliche. But think about this for a minute. Hope is not the only path to unity. Fear also unites us. Manipulative political or social leaders use fear to bring people together. It defines an easy us versus them. It's not only leaders, sometimes good marketers try to make us so afraid that we have to buy something to protect ourselves. But in Judaism, we unify through hope. A unity of love is greater than a unity of hate. In this moment, when anything seems possible in America, when more hate and more division, more rage and more anger and more intolerance, or more healing and reconciliation, realized dreams and hopes fulfilled, when all of that seems possible, we can choose to unify through hope. At a similar time of division and possibility in America, 1865, Abraham Lincoln famously, 1864, he said this, Abraham Lincoln famously called upon the better angels of our nature. It is now our time to call upon the better angels of our nature. This congregation has called upon those better angels for a combined 120 years. And we will continue to do so today because we in America need those better angels now more than ever. We began by talking about the word yirah, fear. And we recognize that it's much more than fear. It's clarity and seeing and faith. Now, the word yirah appears throughout the Bible. But perhaps its most famous appearance is outside of it, in a song that we sing every Shabbat, L'cha Dodi. The last line of that song says, Adonai li velo ira. God is with me. I shall not fear. In this moment of crisis, of pandemic, of change and possibility, as we gather together, let's say to ourselves, Adonai li velo ira. God is with us, and we shall not be paralyzed by fear. Amen.